Welcome to the People Leaders Podcast, the audio resource for managers and business leaders creating high-performing teams. Join leadership and team development experts Jan and Michelle Turkelson each week as they explore both subjects from every angle. Through practical tips, valuable insights, and compelling interviews with leadership experts around the world, you'll learn how to bring out the best in your staff and how to give your best as a leader.
And good morning, everyone. You have solo Jan on today. Usually you've got Michelle, but this time I'm going to be greedy and I'm going to have our guest all to ourselves. And I'm really excited to introduce our next guest. And his name is David Shar. And David is not only a keynote speaker and consultant, he's also a trainer. And he helps and works with organizations to improve their leadership, culture, and also to manage burnout and design meaningful work. And as you know, that's what Michelle and I are all about. So we are really interested in what David has to say. And what he does is he's been working in this field for decades, and he uses the latest research, the psychological research, to help people and organizations attract not only the best talent, but also retain them and motivate your top talent. Because as we know, as leaders, a lot of our time is focused on the poor performers, and the top talent perhaps don't get the oversight and motivation what they really need. Now, not only does David do that, he holds a bachelor's in human resource management from Colorado State University. He's got a master's in organizational psychology from the University of Maryland, and he's currently doing his doctorate in business psychology. So he is a busy man. And what we love about David is not only is he an academic, he is not your typical academic. He really does a great job in translating that theory and research around leadership and business psychology to practical, fun ways of implementing, through real world examples. So David, hello and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Jan. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, when we started connecting, I started looking at some of the work that you've been doing and the way in which you do it. And that's why when we get people on, we usually want people who are quite grounded. So definitely theory has a definite place, because that's when we can think big and think out, and then we want to bring it into, so what does that mean for me right now? And that's what I love about you. Now, when we were talking before, we were talking about people who are experiencing burnout, really. So now that people have had to move away from working at their office into home, we've got a lot of people who are on Zoom from 9 till 5, and sometimes they don't even actually get up. I don't know how they do that, but anyway, some people do, and they're experiencing burnout. And I wanted to get your take on what you think burnout is and what can leaders or businesses do about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. And the research is coming out at a rapid pace right now. And we're seeing that very early signs that people are putting in more and more hours now that they're working at home. And so you think, oh yeah, you're working at home, you could put in a little bit less hours, take advantage of the system. It turns out people don't do that, especially when so many people have their kids at home and they're trying to learn virtually. And so now you're homeschooling in a way, and you have all these other barriers that are standing in your way. And we've always talked about work-life balance, but, that's never been quite accurate for what we actually need and want. What we've been looking for in the past decades is work-life integration, because balance doesn't exist. How are you supposed to have balance when you have a smartphone in your pocket? So that's really sort of come to fruition now as we're at home. And it's not like I can't put up those barriers and say, okay, now I'm at work, because I personally have 5 kids at home. At any moment during this interview, my 3-year-old might come busting through the door, buck naked, yelling, "Dad!" Like it's a circus. And so many of us are living lives like that. So getting back to your original question of what is burnout, So burnout has like three main legs to it. And as you know, so in its original conceptualization, that we look at things like emotional exhaustion, and that starts out as emotional exhaustion or an overload, but it quickly becomes physical. People come down with psychosomatic symptoms. People become very ill because of burnout, because of this overload. The second thing that happens is cynicism. And this is often misunderstood. I think the cynicism piece is about your own psychological safety, right? So we almost do it to protect ourselves because suddenly we feel like we're not able to do our job. We feel overloaded. We feel like we're not really performing. And so we put up boundaries between ourselves and our customers and our clients, whoever it is, and the business itself, our employees. We put up boundaries. And then the third piece is this lack of personal accomplishment. And that ties into this effort reward imbalance where we start feeling like we're churning our legs twice as fast and twice as hard and moving half the speed. We feel like we're not getting things done. And I think that if your listeners really think about us in this COVID world in 2020, and not just COVID, I mean, you're located in Australia. I mean, you guys launched 2020 with your fires. I mean, it was awful. And now only in the year 2020 could people have like moved on from that onto the next thing. It's unbelievable to think this has all been the same year. So with all of these stresses, we are all exhausted. We are all super cynical. And I don't care what news station, what political leaders or anything you're listening to, you're hearing contradictory statements all the time. And we're all confused about what this thing is and where we're going with it. And we all have this reduced sense of personal accomplishment.
Oh, I think you're spot on. And one of the things that I wanted to pick up on was this, the expression of cynicism. And we do it to actually protect ourselves. And we often talk about the Myers-Briggs preferences, the thinking and the feeling preference. And for thinkers, the most important thing for them is accomplishment and this sense of competence. And what I find for thinkers, I know that they're going in stress when they go from healthy skepticism to cynicism. It's like, okay, you're in stress response now. And it's because, and from what you were also saying, is that they don't feel safe, they're overwhelmed, they're in stress, and there is a lack of personal accomplishment because that means competence for them. And because they don't see that, they're reverting to that unexpressed type situation. So I think that's an interesting way that you've been able to encapsulate that so beautifully. So what can we do about it? What can leaders do about this?
Yeah, so typically there's like these two sides to burnout, but often in practice and in research, we become so hyper-focused with one half of it. And I'm going to challenge your listeners as leaders, and I as a leader as saw this within myself. Oftentimes when there is a problem in the building, it is much easier to say the problem is with the employees, especially if that's where it is coming to life, right? So you see increased turnover, you see increased interpersonal conflict, you're seeing all of these issues, people are really checked out, and you're like, people are burning out. So what do? We do resilience training. And that is so important and has never been more important than in 2020 when we see there's so many things outside of our control that do affect us and we need to be resilient. However, that's one half of it. The other half of it is, okay, you're teaching people how to handle the stress that's coming their way, but maybe so much stress shouldn't be coming their way. What is it that's baked into the culture and the structure of the organization that is causing all this stress? And so that's really where I put a lot of my focus, so that we're not really looking at curing the disease once it occurs, but how do we prevent it to begin with?
Absolutely. And so that's what we found interesting, David, is when COVID hit, it was all about supporting people. And then it was around, so how do we performance manage them? And it was just really interesting is that the teams that had already done the work around agreements and communication were riding the wave, but the teams that hadn't done anything were really struggling. They didn't have that built-in flexibility and processes to move through. Yeah.
Right.
And so with a people leader who has a team of 7 people, they're still kind of working away from home. What are some practical things that you would expect a leader to be doing with their team?
I was just talking to, Salt Lake City or St. Louis County, Minneapolis, I think, I hope they don't listen to this. No, it was Minnesota. And I was just speaking with them, and this question came up from one of the participants. And what she said was, when we were in the office, we would do all this team building, and we would be able to check in with each other, and we were building a culture and relationships. And then what? Then we all went home, and now we're teleworking, and we don't have those things. And it's so awkward and structured on Zoom. What can we do about that? And what I said to her is that so often those interactions that are so crucially important happen by accident and by happenstance in the workplace. You're passing Janet's desk and say, oh, by the way, Janet, how's your mother doing? Because her mother is going through chemo, right? And it just happens. Or at the meeting, you say, hey, hang out one sec. I wanted to ask you about something. It just happens. Now, when people are working at home, it is so important that we are more purposeful and calculated about those things. So one of the things that you can really do if your employees are suddenly teleworking is to put it on your calendar, to get on the phone with somebody and just check in, not to talk business, but just to say, how's everything going? 10 minutes. That's all it takes.
Yeah, love that. So we often talk about doing coffee roulette. So, like having a team member and you put your names in a hat, you draw them out. And so during the week, you're just going to check in with them. And we've got some leaders who are leaving their Zoom screen open on a Friday for 2 hours, and everyone can just pop in whenever they want. So leaders are starting, or the good leaders are starting to do that anyway. And I really like your point about those relationships and the opportunity to connect and have those what we call corridor conversations, because that brings a sense of purpose and meaning to the way in which you operate in your world of work. So what I'm interested in now is that when people are working by themselves pretty much and they're still connecting, there's a sense of being mundane, like it's like the same thing is happening over and over again, because there's not a lot of external things that are changing much. So how can people actually find a bit of, meaning from the mundane? What's a strategy, something they could do?
It's a great question. By the way, back to your ideas. I love your ideas about connecting through Zoom and just leaving it open and having sort of those office hour kind of things. Another really fun thing that I've seen is sending somebody a virtual gift card to a coffee, like to the local coffee shop.
Yes,
so they can get a coffee, you get a coffee, and then you Zoom while drinking the coffee. It's just a nice little thing. They get a $5 gift card or whatever in their inbox. So in terms of, sorry, I sidetracked myself from your question. So you were asking about these mundane tasks that are happening at home now, and it just seems like every day is the same. How do you reconnect with the meaningful part? And that's actually the main focus of my research is on this connection between burnout and meaningful work. So from the very beginning of the conceptualization of burnout, we always said, this is really weird. It hits people in customer facing or patient facing occupations more than anybody else. And we really went down that rabbit hole. Oh, it's about those interactions with the client or patient or student. But if you start looking at the industries where it hits hardest, you're talking about teachers, you're talking about nurses, you're talking about clergy, you're talking about all these different social work, you're talking about all these occupations that are objectively meaningful, right? So maybe we were looking at this the wrong way. And what we're really finding is that it's when people enter the world of work with these great expectations that work is going to produce meaning, that they are going to impact the world. And then all of these things, the bureaucracy, the interpersonal conflict, all of the stuff, the mundane tasks get in the way of you doing that miracle work that you got into this to do. So if I could share a quick story about my backstory with you, I actually started this whole journey in an ice cream parlor in Baltimore City. So I owned an ice cream franchise, and all my employees, almost all of them, came from the inner city of Baltimore. So I don't know if you've seen The Wire on HBO, a really gritty show about Baltimore City and the crime and drugs. And this, so many of my crew members were living this life. These were teenagers, young adults living this life. And what set me on my path and actually sent me back to school to sort of answer these questions and started developing these questions. These kids were coming to work every day and were so engaged in their work, and somehow found meaning in scooping ice cream. While my friends who were teachers and doctors and lawyers and accountants, they were dreading Monday. They did not want to go to work in the beginning of the week because they weren't finding meaning there. So I think it has much less to do with how objectively meaningful your work is and much more to do with your ability to find the meaning in it. And I challenge anybody to show me a business that doesn't add some sort of value to the world. You show me that business, I'll show you a bankrupt business.
Yes.
Because that's the point of business. We're in business to add a service, right? And so work is this place that we can come together in diverse groups of people with complementary skills and have this impact on the world that is so much larger than we could ever have on our own. And so even the most mundane tasks have a meaning because they are leading you to getting that service done, to impacting that world in some way. And as leaders, we need to be so mindful of constantly helping our employees make that connection.
Oh, absolutely.
They need to be able to connect with that deeper thing.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's why I love Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, because as a human being, we are searching for it, and it takes a consciousness. So we are meaning-making machines. We can make meaning out of everything. So let's make it mean something that is wholesome and kind of fulfilling for us. And it's about that service. So, yeah, I love that. So, David, what do you think are going to be the long-term effects of COVID in the way in which we work?
Yeah, I'm hoping there's going to be a lot of good that comes out of this. I think in the short term, obviously we're feeling some pain. And even in the moderate term, I think that there might be a lot of job and career hopping as the economy does come back and allows for that. I think people are going to hop careers because I think some teachers have decided they're never going to teach again once they can figure out an exit plan, as well as people. And I don't know how hard nursing homes and assisted living homes were hit in Australia, but I mean,
very big
in America. I've got to imagine that a huge percentage of people that work in these industries are looking for a plan B with the amount of stress that they've gone through and continue to go through this year. So I think there will be a little bit of a shakeup. But I think after that or through that process, I hope that we have now learned the value of that work-life integration. I think everybody's become a little bit more human to each other now, that leaders have become a little bit more sensitive to their employees often. and that telework is now here to stay to a great extent. And I'm hoping that some of these things stick around.
Oh, and we're seeing that too, David, is that the structure, the hierarchy of organizations are flattening out, because senior leaders now, the executive leaders who are usually flying around, are actually stable. Yeah. They've got more time on their hands. People can actually send them a Zoom invite and it's not as scary because they're in their own safe place. And so we're actually finding there is this kind of like flattening of that hierarchical structure. And also executive leaders have children who come in during a Zoom meeting. So absolutely, we are seeing the human side. And I think that's the gift for all of us. And people are experiencing that, wow, I haven't had breakfast with my children for the last 3 years, and I'm going to make sure that I have breakfast with them at least 3 days a week or every morning now. That's it. It's kind of like people have drawn a line in the sand and kind of like woken up to possibility of the way in which we can do work. Yeah.
Right.
So if I'm someone who is working from home, I'm homeschooling and all that, and I'm actually thinking about a plan B, what do you think they could start to do? Like, what's a tangible thing they could start to do to support that kind of like the possibility of doing something else?
Yeah, I think as we look for meaning and connection, and when we have these big hiccups in our life, it really brings something like that on, where we're sort of rethinking our path and ready to re-explore it. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think they really need to start thinking about what is it that lights their fire, and follow that. It's interesting because there's a lot of things that light our fire that there's no demand for, and nobody would ever pay you a penny for. But when you find the thing that people will pay you for, and it aligns with your values and your sense of purpose and with your skill set, when those three things in that Venn diagram all come together, I think that's that you're onto something when you see that. But also understand that very quickly that will become your new job, your new requirement. And unfortunately, we have these very short memories. And so I think even when you're talking about when people are committing, I'm going to do breakfast 3 times a week with my kids, write that down, like hold yourself to that.
Right,
because if you don't, this is going to disappear. I remember in the States, in America, I remember 9/11 and how everybody loved everybody, and there was no difference in the country, and it didn't matter, and all sides of, I mean, look at my country now, and how many years are we from that? It doesn't feel like that long ago. So we do have this way of getting right back to the status quo. So what you're feeling now is real, and you should own it, and you should write it down, and you should commit to a change if that's what you're looking for.
Oh, I love it, David. Make it clear, make it present, set up your environment to remind you. So the thing that I picked up for you is that it's important to understand what your values are, your skill set, and also what brings you that lightness or that joy. But even the fact of actually starting to write those things down and seeing how that makes you feel, and looking at people in certain areas that actually have that or marry with what you have, could be the start of moving in that direction. You may not end up in that direction, but you're doing something physical and tangible in the direction of where you want to go. And that's success. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I love that.
Right. And it gives you this sense of control. And that's huge when you talk about burnout. That is a huge piece of burnout, this loss of the sense of control, which we all have right now. We all have this diminished sense of control. Taking on a side project right now is a great way of just grabbing that and taking control of something.
Yeah. Oh, we've had a masterclass in flexibility. You know what I mean? Controlling the controllables. That's right. Yeah. So what do you do, David, for your kind of mental, emotional, and physical well-being and resilience? Can you just share with us a couple of things that you do?
Yeah. So first of all, I run. I love running. I wouldn't say that I'm good at it. I've run a marathon and a couple of half marathons and finished before they pulled me off the course. Sometimes I've had to beg them to let me finish, but I've finished. But really running for me is about getting out and clearing my head, and really just being able to turn off my phone and sort of walk away for a little bit. And then my kids, like I love my kids and hanging out with them and my wife. And then the third thing is I'm very passionate about my work, but I've also job crafted my entire life. And in self-employment, what I love about what I do is that every gig is different. So as soon as life starts feeling monotonous, it's like, okay, I'm on to my next client. I'm on to my next problem. I'm on to my next solution to find it. And that keeps me super engaged and intrigued and always connected to my why. I think that everybody should have that experience of having work be something more than just a paycheck. And so that's what I'm here to help people do.
Yeah, beautiful. So can you leave us with some, like some words of wisdom for people who are listening now and feeling a little bit exhausted, moving towards, a break towards Christmas and New Year's and things like that? What are some of the things that you would like to share with those people?
Yeah, well, if it's okay, I'd like to share a quick story for them. Because I think it's very relevant, because I think all the things we're talking about in terms of feeling sort of a little bit lost now and a little bit, trying to get our bearings straight. So some years ago, my wife was driving home from her in-laws' house, and late at night, she had my two oldest, who were pretty young back then. So I think my son was about 5 years old and sitting in the middle seat. My daughter was about 2 or 3 in a car seat in the very back. And they're driving back really late at night because it takes my in-laws like hours to say goodbye. It's like one of those situations, right? She probably started leaving in the middle of the afternoon, but so she doesn't turn on the radio, nothing, so that the 3-year-old, my daughter, will just fall asleep in the back. And as they're driving home, they pass this big field, and my son is quietly looking out the window. So he breaks the silence and says, "Mommy, what's the purpose of deer?" I guess they had passed this herd of deer, and my wife is a teacher, so she knows exactly how to answer these questions. She says, "I don't know, honey. What do you think the purpose of deer is?" Turn it right back on him. And so they go back and forth and start thinking about maybe it's to add grace and beauty to the world. He thought maybe it's to keep the foxes well fed, whatever it is, right? And so they go back and forth, and then the car goes silent again until this little peep from the back seat, from the car seat in the back where everyone thought my daughter was sleeping. They suddenly heard, "Mommy, what's my purpose?" And my wife's mind starts going a mile a minute trying to figure out the answer to a question like this, thinking, what is her purpose? Is she going to find the cure for cancer? Is she going to invent the next Facebook? What is her purpose? And before she could utter a word in response, my 5-year-old son said to my daughter, Rena, he said, "That's easy, Rena. Your joy, that's your purpose. You make people happy."
Oh.
And so what the takeaway for me from this story is that my wife was doing what all of us would do, because we've become so indoctrinated with the idea that in order to live a purposeful life, we need to make it to the cover of Time magazine. And if not, oh, well, we'll try next time. Hope reincarnation is a thing, right? But what my son understood was something that we all understood when things weren't so complicated, that basically a meaningful life is living your authentic self and having an impact through that to those around you. And from there, it continues to expand and continues to expand until you have literally changed the world. And so when we go and we think, my business used to be this huge thing that was impacting so many lives, and now how am I impacting things? Or I used to see all these people, I used to volunteer, I used to be there for my employees every day, and now you feel like you are so trapped. It's okay. You don't need to be a superhero every day. You just need to be you. And whatever your thing is, whether it's kindness or humor or empathy or whatever it is, to be that and to bring that to the people that are connected to you.
David, I just have goosebumps, and anyone listening to that, if you have goosebumps, there is something that is moving through you and talking to you. And thank you for sharing that wisdom. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful and timely reminder. Our job is to be ourselves, as fully and presently as we can. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way, David?
Yeah, they can will always find me on LinkedIn. As you know, I'm very active on there. LinkedIn.com/IN/David Shar, pretty straightforward. And they could find me at my website, Illuminate PMC for performance management consultants, illuminatepmc.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, David. I'm going to let those words of wisdom, flow through me today. I really appreciate it. Thank you, David.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to the People Leaders Podcast with Michelle and Jan Turkelson. For show notes and other free resources, please visit us at peopleleaderspodcast.com. Do you know someone else who could benefit from cutting-edge leadership and management techniques? Please take a moment to share this and other episodes via your podcast app, email, or social media channels. Each share helps us fulfill our goals of reducing workplace stress and increasing job satisfaction for leaders, managers, and their teams worldwide. The People Leaders Podcast is brought to you by the Experts On Air Podcast Network.